Hey guys, and welcome back to the Motorcycle Room. Today we have an exciting video because I have a new project that's going to require me to learn how to weld. So I'm going to be unveiling this project in the next week or so, but leave a comment below with your best guess on what it is. This is an exciting time because it's the Harbor Freight 3-day sale. Well, it will be over by the time you're watching this, but I was able to pick up a welding mask and a cheap DC Flux core welder for only about $200, and that's a bit more than $0, but it's much less than like a TIG welder or a real MIG welder. And today I'm going to see if I can learn to weld on this and figure out how to weld a body panel with it. So I've read and seen online that it's possible, and I have here a bumper that I bought from a Miata that has some rust right here, and I'm going to be trying to weld in a new replacement panel where this rust is. Okay, so this is the welder. Just gonna open it up, see what's inside. This welder has that really nice made in China tape smell. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but some items that are imported like directly from China, the tape smells different on them. It smells like China, so that's nice. Got our user manual. Seems pretty straightforward. Then we have a single tip. And this little itty bitty welder, look how small this is. This is a tiny welder. Seems like it's like, oh, it smells terrible. It smells like plastic and cheap paint. But overall, quality doesn't seem too bad. Comes with a spool of wire. People say to throw this away, but I'm going to keep it and use it. I'm also going to keep the box in case I need to return this whole thing. Okay, so quick start guide.
Setting up the welder was pretty easy. All I had to do was remove the retainer wheel and then put this welding rod wheel on and then feed it through the feeder. I'm not exactly sure if those are the right terms for it, but it wasn't too bad, though feeding it through the feeder took a little bit to get it to line up with the holes. The irritating part here is that it was really slow to feed through. At times it would do this.
Look how slow this feeds. I have to wait until it comes out of the tip.
And other times it would actually feed smoothly. So I'm not sure why it does this, but...
Okay, so we have it on. We're going to do our first welds. We got our welding helmet.
Don't forget your gloves, that's a key thing I almost forgot. It's kind of hard to tell from the video, but here I was really having trouble getting the weld to hold. I've never done flux core welding before, so it was kind of strange. Like, I would tap it on and it would not continue to weld as I was expecting. Kind of started to get the hang of it a little bit more, but I was not able to lay down a consistent feed, and I don't think that it was the welder's fault. I think it was definitely my fault, as you'll see later in the video.
Oh my god. Well, that doesn't look very good. So here's some of my cleaned up welds. They look like total crap, and I think this is because I figured out I was keeping the tip way too long. This needs to be like right up against it, I guess. like basically a ½ inch away, and I had it much more than that, so I am going to try some more, see how that goes.
The next time around, with keeping the working tip distance much closer, I was able to lay down much better welds, and it was a lot easier. Definitely still not perfect and doesn't look that great, but it was really fun trying to figure it out and trying to get a smooth weld bead laid down on this single sheet. Then I figured I'd try welding a thin piece of sheet metal to a thicker piece. This did not work very well. It kind of instantly warped the thinner sheet, and I realized also that I think my settings were incorrect for the thinner sheet. So I tried welding on the thinner sheet, and that also warped it more, but it was still pretty productive. Then I welded up a T-junction once I had the settings right for the thinner sheet, and what seemed to work well is if I kind of tack welded it together and then filled it in with a bunch of like a high wire feed rate.
So I had to run to the store and grab some cutoff wheels, and the next thing that I'm going to do is try to start doing welds on thinner sheet metal and see if I can weld it together, and maybe then try to fix this Miata bumper. Actually, it's a fender, but
I know you're probably thinking, wow, Ben, you really did not dress well for this video. And that's true, because I didn't want to ruin any nice clothes. The eagle-eyed amongst you might also notice that that is a Harbor Freight angle grinder, which I also purchased for $10 at the tool sale, which is absurdly low price for an angle grinder, but it worked well. So here what I was trying to do was just weld together 2 thin sheets of sheet metal, and that actually worked pretty well. I just had to make sure that the wire feed rate in front of the welder was high, so that it was kind of depositing a little bit of extra material on top of the thin sheet metal, which seemed to prevent it from overheating or blowing through. Then I ground down the welds to kind of make them look flat and see what sort of finish I could achieve, even if it was a little bit thick. So after feeling kind of comfortable with that, I decided to get to work on the fender. I tried to grind it down to bare metal as best I could, as you can see, and then got to work cutting out a piece and then cutting a piece to fit. I didn't do the whole rusty part because I wanted to see how this would look before I actually kind of bit the bullet and cut the whole fender.
here you can see plate. I actually think this might work. You can see that there's a little bit of a gap, which is less than ideal, but we do have at least a solid piece of sheet metal on the back, which is kind of what I want. I just want to make sure that when this rust repair is complete, that it's structurally sound. I don't really care that it looks good. I'll probably sand down and Bondo over this, like the same process that I've seen people do with fiberglass or other sorts of fillers, but I want it to be able to be structurally sound. So I'm going to continue this and see if I can get a nice looking weld. Probably won't be able to. I actually ground it down. Here you can see it's been ground down, so it, you know, I think if I filled this with body filler, it would be okay. And you're probably asking yourself, as I am, what's even the point of having done this weld-in replacement of the metal when I could just do fiberglass and Bondo or something like that? But I really think this is more useful, because if I, you know, fill this with Bondo and sand it down, it will
you know, still be much more structural than if it was just fiberglass. So there's some repairs that I anticipate having to do that will be semi-structural, and I'd like to figure out how to weld those, so that's why I'm doing this. I know it doesn't look great, but hopefully it will get better. So here are some of the welds I was able to achieve with this cheap Harbor Freight welder. I think they're not great, but you can definitely see that I got better as time went on. These are some of the earlier ones, which are absolute junk. And these ones, I just did. So I'm starting to feel a little bit confident, a little bit more confident. This is on the 16 gauge, which is much easier to weld on than the 22 gauge over here. 22 gauge really a struggle. So I think this will work for my bodywork projects. I did a little bit more practice here. This is with 22 gauge, which is very thin, probably too thin, and much thinner hopefully than the body panels will be. But I think I'm starting to get the hang of it, and I know this is a pretty bad seam, but some of these welds are not, you know, so horrible. Like, I think that they'll hold at least, and that's what matters to me. Because I think most of the welds I'll be doing are non-cosmetic, and they will be hidden by other things.
So that's basically it for this motorcycle room video. I just wanted to do a little bit of welding, show you guys this new welder that I bought from Harbor Freight. I'm not sponsored by Harbor Freight, but I do buy almost all my tools from there because it's so cheap. This is the titanium Easy Flux 125 or something like that. And I think it works really well. I was even able to dial it down to the point where I can weld a really crappy, but functional, you know, it's not breaking, weld on 22 gauge steel. So this is a very thin steel, and I did have some blow through spots, but it worked pretty well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think.